Good afternoon to our CLA family members, clients, community partners, and friends. Welcome back to the live stream. It's great to be here today, and we hope everyone has been staying safe and healthy at this time. So today we have some of my favorite CLA family members joining me to talk about flexible tax planning in light of all the proposals that we're seeing from the Biden administration. Susan Roberts, who leads tax for our manufacturing and distribution industry, will kick us off with a summary of what's proposed and how that impacts many in her industry and really in all industries. Carey Heyman, who leads our real estate industry at CLA, and Andy Bollman, who leads transportation and logistics, will be here to comment on how to make all of this fit from a capital gains, succession, and estate planning focus. And then everybody's going to spend some time really giving you some guidance about how do we engage in flexible tax planning discussions with our advisors in light of everything that's out there right now. Now, before we dive in today, we do have some housekeeping that we want to cover with you. As you know, we have the ability for live Q&A during our session, but in order to participate, you must register and log in using the link below me. The questions are going to appear for you to see, and then like and move up in priority so that we can address them on the show today. We also, as always, have moderators standing by in the chat to interact with you real time. Today, too, what's different is we also have a scroll rolling at the bottom of the session of all of our coming events. A few in particular that I think you'd like to check out are the one on June 23rd and June 24th, which are really about developing your financial health and wellness, especially in light of what we need to know with potential tax law changes. So very relevant follow-up to today's conversation. And then on June 24th, we actually have some developing trends, cybersecurity preparedness, and managing unsuspected breach. So you can register for all of these on our website. So please definitely go there. And you can also reach out to us using the Contact Us button to engage. Now, the other thing that's happening for this summer that I want to talk to you about at the start of the show, and I'll remind you about before we close, is that we're planning to host the live stream now every other Thursday so that you can take time to really dive into these events and not be overwhelmed by the conversation with us. That said, don't worry. If we do have legislation pass or we have some urgent updates for you, we'll come back at that regular weekly cadence that you're used to from us on the live stream, so that you can be in the know immediately. In addition to the webinars, always be on the lookout for articles, white papers, and additional guidance from us. So just very much continue to interact with us using the website and directly with your advisor. We want to engage with you. So now I want to get started with Susan. We've got so much to cover today. So Susan, welcome back. And
Hi.
As always, hi, I just love seeing you. I love having you here with me. And one of the things that I love about you, I was actually saying to Andy earlier today, is that I always learn something when I get to present with you. And so today, what I was hoping is that you would start us off by really separating some of the fact and fiction from what's going on as far as what are all these proposals, because the articles I'm reading in the news kind of make it feel like everything that's proposed is actually happening. So I think there's a lot of fear mongering and craziness as a result.
It's true.
So what I'd love for you to do, if you don't mind, just spend a little time introducing all of us to what is out there right now. What are people reading about in the news, and comparing that, really helping us unpack which of that is proposed and which of it has passed.
Absolutely. I would be thrilled to do so. And you guys, Jen, you're exactly right. There is so much out there. The majority of the things that we're going to talk about today really are proposed. So what does proposed mean? It means it is not law. So once something becomes law, then now we have something. But we do want to talk about what's proposed so that we can think about planning for that. Now, I do want to point out a couple of funny things about tax. Sometimes you'll hear in a tax act that's actually passed, it'll say something like, it makes this tax provision permanent. And what I want to point out is that it does make that provision permanent until it's not. So tax law changes all the time. And so really, there's really nothing permanent about it because it can certainly be changed afterwards. I am now going to just touch on some of the top bills that are out there, and I am happy to send $100 to anyone that can repeat all the names of all of these bills immediately after I do. So we've got the For the 99.5% Act, the Sensible Tax and Equity Promotion Act, the American Families Act, the Made in America Act, the Building an Economy for Families Act, Protection for the Rights to Organize Act, the American Jobs Act, or Plan actually, and several energy bills. Ready, go. You get your $100.
Dude, so, I can't, and I'm looking at it.
It's crazy. So with that said, let me just talk a little bit about some of this. So this stuff covers everything from changes in our estate tax plan, in our gift tax regimen. In addition, our individual income tax would be affected. So would our corporate income tax potentially, if it passes. There could be child care provisions, foreign tax credit changes, earned income tax credit changes, all infrastructure packages, all kinds of stuff. And in particular, I do want to just, using other people's words, unpack for you a little bit the American Families Plans Act. The American Family Plan Act, and just talk a little bit about it. I do lead tax for manufacturing and distribution, but what we're about to discuss is really industry agnostic. So some of the items in this particular act include things like the top individual rate could, if it passes, go up from 37% to 39.6%. That is something to talk about. And how do we plan for that? In addition, the capital gains rate, if you make over $1 million, it is proposed that it could go from our capital gains rate now, which is a maximum of 20% plus the net investment income tax, which takes it to something called 23.8%. That could go to the ordinary rates of 39.6 if you make over $1 million. So we want to talk about that. In addition, the net investment income tax, which is this 3% tax that came in a number of years ago just on investment income. It is proposed that that 3.8% rate would be taxed to anyone who makes over $400,000. So not everyone, just only if you make over $400,000, that tax would be tacked onto your ordinary income tax rate. A few other items in this act is that the carried interest, which if you're not sure what a carried interest is, feel free to reach out to us. We would be happy to talk to you about that. It's a way to get an interest in a partnership for services. Historically, that has been taxed at capital gains rate if as long as you have a disposition after 3 years. It is proposed that could become ordinary tax rates. Taxed at ordinary tax rates. So those are some of the pay-fors, is what we call them. That's some of the stuff that would bring money into the system. And what would that money potentially be used for? I'll just throw out one item because I find it intriguing, and that is that it would provide public education, in other words, free education for 4 more years for our children. 2 of those years would be on the front end for 3 and 4-year-olds, so additional preschool, and 2 years would be on the back end of year 13 of your schooling for 2 years of community college. So a total of 4, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. One thing is, so if this were to pass, when is it going to be effective? Well, let me tell you what we call the Green Book says about that, which is Biden's potential plan. It will be effective on the date of announcement. Wow. Now, who knows what that means?
Wow. Yeah. The date of announcement as the effective date, not going back to January 1st, and not really sure when that'll be.
Has announcement already happened? Mm-hmm. It may have.
Exactly.
So that's just a few things that are kind of out there to let you know. Again, everything we just talked about is only proposed, not passed.
Susan, I think that is so helpful just to help everybody have an overview of, hey, these are the things that we're looking at. These are how the rates are going to change. These are the questions you might have depending on where your income level is and maybe when you talk to your advisor. So that sets the framework really well for the conversation that we're about to have with the entire group. Now, one thing we need to understand more of, I think, and I know we all agree on this as a group, is that infrastructure bill that you mentioned.
Mhm.
So Andy, I'm going to call on you to just talk about that a little bit before we move into the next pieces of this discussion, just to give everybody a little bit of background.
Sure. Certainly can, Jen, and thanks for the overview, Susan. So with the infrastructure bill, or what they're calling the American Jobs Plan, it's typically what you think of as an infrastructure bill. They're going to talk about funding things like fixing highways, fixing bridges, upgrading, airports and transit systems. As part of that, as Susan mentioned, we need to pay for these. So a couple of things that they're looking at doing in order to pay for these traditional infrastructure bills, they're talking about raising the corporate tax rates from 21 to a proposed 28%. They're talking about revising the whole global tax structure on how they look at these multi-country, multi-global, corporations. One thing they've thrown out in the last week and a half is possibly imposing a 15% minimum tax on book earnings for large corporations. One of the things we've heard in the news is that the largest corporations don't pay any tax. This is a way to kind of like an alternative minimum tax for individuals and bringing that back. And maybe to steal a line from Carey, as we hear him say often, these things are fluid. They're constantly changing. One thing we do know is that the infrastructure bill, or the American Jobs Plan, is likely going to get passed and have the most, it's going to be passed first before they look at doing some of the other things, like the American Families Plan. And the main reason for that is it has a strong sense of being bipartisan. And that way they can look at the American Families Plan, and if they need to, they can go through what's called the budget reconciliation process later in the year, and they're kind of looking at that as an extension of this infrastructure bill.
Andy, I think that's super helpful to understand, and I like how you frame this as far as like, well, what has to happen first before we can even get to the next plan? So I think that also helps give people just a sense of ease and guidance as far as what's happening next. Now the other thing is, as both you and Susan are talking about this, we really have a lot here that relates to capital gains. And I know that a lot of business owners are experiencing angst just kind of facing that and having that awareness of like, gosh, something's going to change with my capital gains. What's that going to look like? So, Carey, one of the things that's very cool that you do on a regular basis is your blog post. And I know you've had a lot to say on this point in your blog that touches all industries too. It's not just for real estate, right? Especially when it comes to 1031 exchanges, which is something that we typically think about in real estate. So I was hoping what you could do is spend a little time sharing with some of what you've been talking to your clients about in these discussions and your blog, just as it relates to capital gains and how we have that planning conversation.
Sure. Thank you, Jen. Thanks for having me today. And it's an honor to work with you again. You've been so busy with ERC and the live streams that I don't get to work with you as often. So I'm truly appreciative of this half an hour session with you. And,
hey, I love it, friend.
Andrew really hit the head on the nail on the head with respect to this being fluid. The infrastructure bill has some really great things in the bill. So there is bipartisan support. We know that the White House and the Democrats walked away from the negotiation table. So there's two different avenues that are being pursued right now. We're paying close attention to the infrastructure bill because, surprisingly, besides infrastructure, there's a lot of talk about public housing, affordable housing, rezoning. There's some commercial building retrofit that's going to incorporate into larger real estate expansion and building plans. But where we've been spending a lot of our time in the real estate industry is really going through what Susan referred to as the Treasury's Green Book, which is the all-encompassing analysis put out by the Treasury of the tax and revenue plans for the White House. This is the first time we've seen the Green Book in about 4 years. To no one's surprise, really, the Trump administration didn't really conform to historical norms. So this is the first time we've seen a Green Book in a while. And there was a lot in there. When we got the announcement from President Biden in late April about the American Families Plan, there were a lot of questions. And then the Green Book came out at the end of May, and we've been kind of devouring all of the literature in there, and we have a ton more questions. So it is fluid. Andy hit it just perfectly right there. It is fluid. There's a lot that can change between now and the end of the year, and we'll get to a little bit about the conversations we're having with our clients later. But the real focus of our industry and of our blogs, the Real Estate Industry Insights blog, which you're more than welcome to subscribe to, we would love to share our knowledge with all of our audience today, is really focusing on carried interest, which Susan already hit on. The real question is, for the real estate industry, are we really affected because we're looking into 1231 versus 1061? I'm not going to get into code sections and lose our audience in the middle of this live stream, but that's been our focus there. Private equity, on the other hand, is paying really close attention to the carried interest portion of the American Families Plan, because that would do major damage to how they conduct business day in and day out. Their whole model is built on getting that carried interest. So that's a little difficult. Jen, like you mentioned, we've been focusing on the partial repeal of Section 1031 exchanges. That has been a mainstay in the real estate industry and for real estate investors for a very long period of time. It has been a bipartisan thing to attack for a very long time now. Most recently in 2017, House Republicans were looking to eliminate the 1031 exchange as a way to refill the coffers. This is scary for us in the real estate industry. It really is. It could do a lot of damage. The interesting thing I read today from Bloomberg was that the expected repeal would generate $19.6 billion of revenue over the next 10 years for the government. On the flip side, 1/3 of the users of the Section 1031 exchange are REITs, real estate investment trusts. So that's interesting, because oftentimes REITs get excluded from a lot of these proposals. So it kind of makes you wonder, we need to be lobbying a little bit harder. And with that, I'll bring up that one of my suggestions to our clients is write your congressperson, because this is gonna change a lot of business models in the real estate and private equity worlds. Lastly, if I could just touch on, and this wasn't necessarily President Biden. Senator Warren was talking about this for a long time. Senator Wyden out of Oregon was talking about this for a long time. It's treating appreciated property, appreciated stock, whatever you have, your ownership, as realization events. And that is going to blow our entire tax game out of the water, because everything that we've known to be true is now completely off the table. And there are a ton of questions that come up on what qualifies as a realization event. It's by death or by gift, and where the tax is paid, and there's all this stuff, and it's very fluid, like Andy mentioned. But all I can say is that we are actively monitoring the situation, and this is going to be quite a shock to our system. And like Susan referred to earlier, the effective date, according to President Biden in the Green Book, was as of the date of the announcement. Does that mean in April when he announced this proposal? Is it at the end of May when the Green Book was released? I mean, the IRS and the White House were very careful in how they crafted this proposal. They want very limited time for us, for CPAs, for attorneys, and for our clients to really plan for all of these proposed changes.
Yeah, there is a lot of great points packed into what you said, and just a lot to watch out for, which I think, what you said is there's not a lot of time, or going to be a lot of time, for us to catch up, right, on whatever passes and really digest it, which is why I think so many of us are talking about this before it passes. Usually we as advisors kind of stay away from like the proposal talk, but in this case, it's almost imperative so that we have a good handle on what to do next once it is passed, and we're aware of what that effective date actually shakes out to be. So Andy, before I move on to Susan with some of the estate and succession planning, did you have any more to add to the capital gains discussion, just based on some of the infrastructure bill? And
I think Carey hit the nail on the head. With everything going on, I think the biggest thing is to be flexible. Give yourself some time. If you've already extended your return, leave it open. You have until 9/15 or maybe 10/15. Give yourself some time to see what may happen. These proposals are fluid. We don't know when or what will come about them, but give yourself some time and some flexibility just in case you need to do something down the road. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the flexibility, and I'm excited because that's going to be sort of the meat of what we talk about next after we get through succession, is how do we go about being flexible. But that scenario modeling, that planning, I think is going to be hugely important. So as I kind of hinted at, and as we all know, all of these increasing tax rates, there is also a big impact, right, on estate and succession planning, especially from what we've seen on a very high level with the Green Book, as well as kind of this potential decrease in overall exemptions. So Susan, we heard a little bit from you about this, and I was wondering if you and maybe Andy and Carey too, if you all want, could speak to sort of the impact you're seeing on business owners from a succession mindset from those conversations and things that they need to be aware of.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be honored. So yes, this is a very interesting list of proposals of changes. So when you think about the estate income tax, what is proposed is that the exemption amount, which means the amount of fair market value of assets that you can leave to the next generation and not pay estate tax on it, it is proposed that go down from $11.7 million per person down to potentially $3.5 million per person. That's a pretty big drop. And that may be interesting or shocking to think about. It's a pretty big drop. But let's think about something that might be even more jarring. And that is that throughout my career, and everyone can see, I've been in this career a really long time. Do you see the wrinkles? Okay. So throughout my career, there's always been this concept of something called a step up in basis, which means that when someone passes away and they leave an asset to you, maybe let's say a piece of real estate, if their basis in that real estate, they bought it for $200,000. When they passed away, it was worth $500,000 and I inherit it. That means I get basis in that land of $500,000, which means I could go sell it immediately upon inheriting it and pay no gain whatsoever. It's the stepped up basis principle. It is proposed that perhaps that concept will go away, meaning that death could become a taxable event. And I don't mean the estate tax, I mean a death income tax on the appreciation of those assets. So when we start thinking about some of that, again, proposed. Mm-hmm. So going back to fluid, right? Mm-hmm. We do think that there's some value in doing some planning now, even though this hasn't passed, so that if it passes and if we have time to do some planning, we have done 90% of the legwork of what we want it to look like, and all we have to do is execute the documents. So some of this will also come in on succession planning for your businesses. Some of this capital gains rate stuff may come in as well. So please reach out to us and let us help.
I think I think that is such a key point that you make, and so meaningful and impactful to just our audience, whether it's the collaborative of CPAs that join us to listen, to understand, what all is going on, kind of where are our heads in this, and then the collection of business owners that turn to us for guidance through all of this. To your point, it does have to be a fluid conversation, right? So again, I feel like each of you is really meeting the mark here and hitting the nail on the head is what I keep hearing you guys say to each other. And I think that's really correct. So what I'd like to do now, which is a little bit different from our usual live streams where we have our presenters talk about one thing after another, but I'd like to hear the three of you engage in a really collaborative discussion with one another about how are you staying flexible with tax planning, and specifically what those conversations are looking like with your clients from a modeling perspective, from a guidance perspective, from a peace of mind perspective, and then maybe share with the audience really some of your thoughts about what are the best questions to be addressing as we're staying flexible with our tax planning. So I don't know who it's best to start with. Carey, I think because you said you missed me the most, I'm going to start with you on this.
I appreciate that, Jen, and I'm smirking. I'm grinning from ear to ear because Susan's bringing the energy today, and I don't want anyone to think that's a full endorsement of these plans. That's for sure.
Susan does bring the energy in every interaction. I can call Susan at 10:30 on a Monday night at the end of a long start to the week, if you will, and she's always got that loving energy. So that is true. That's, I think, why I learn so much from her every time we interact. So, but
Thank
Carey,
you.
I do want to start with you if you don't mind, just
Yeah.
maybe sharing high level, like, again, just what are these conversations looking like? What questions are the key questions to maybe be thinking about? And again, I do want to hear from Susan and Andy as well. Again, whether it's industry specific guidance, but really just what are business owners asking? How do we allay those fears? How do we model out what the potential changes are so that we can be prepared if we need to execute at a moment's notice?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. And first and foremost, we have to have the communication with our clients, right? Doing a live stream like this, talking about these proposals that are out there, like Susan mentioned, and I'd be more than happy to repeat offline because I have the script and I could get $100 from her, is there's a lot out there and there's a lot to kind of to model and to play out. So the first step is communication. Our clients, our prospects, our people in our universe need to know what's going on in these proposals. The second part of the equation is I think we need to reach across the aisle, so to speak, to our friends on the legal side, because there's a lot of opportunities that they're also looking at also. One that we didn't talk about was the time frame in which we would be able to pay such tax derived on that death event. They're talking 15 years right now, which that could create a huge planning opportunity. The tax isn't going to be due immediately. It could be due over time. And then the question then always comes in is how long does that change the statute for? Does the statute of limitations suddenly change? How long can the IRS come after you for the tax that's due? So there are planning opportunities out there. We just need more information from the White House, from the Treasury, to see how this is going to progress. So back to what I said, first and foremost, we got to talk to our clients about what's going on. Second, it'd be great to collaborate with our attorney friends to see what they're thinking, what they're seeing, because we're already kind of building plans and ideas of what we can do on our side. The last suggestion is don't panic. Again, like what Susan alluded to at the beginning and all of us have really touched on, these are proposals. There's a lot out there right now. And as we know, a lot can change. The Democrats have Congress right now, razor thin margins. There are a lot of Democrats in states such as California, New York, and New Jersey that were very upset that not only is the SALT deduction, the repeal of the SALT deduction, not in any of these proposals, but also President Trump's 199A. Why is that still around? I mean, I thought that would have been on the chopping block right away. So, again, it's having those conversations with your clients because there's a lot out there, but it's also not time to panic yet.
I think that's awesome. So, Andy, Susan, what are your thoughts on this? What would you like to echo that Carey hit squarely, and maybe what nuances are you also bringing to those discussions?
I'll jump in quickly. I have one thing that we're doing is that we have some clients who have an option of doing a transaction now, or doing a transaction later, or recognizing income now, or recognizing income later. I have a client quite literally yesterday, if they're watching, who's talking about a like-kind exchange. And we talked about the idea of let's go ahead, if possible, and do that now, and then hope that there's nothing retroactive with regard to that to get the full exclusion of the gain that may become limited to $500,000 exclusion. In addition, if you have the opportunity to push or to pull income into this year or push deductions to next year, if the rates actually do go up, that may be a smart move right now and something that we may be able to control to a degree.
Well, and Susan, it's interesting that you say that. One of the audience questions that have come in while we've been chatting was, are you saying that the 1031 exchange could retroactively be eliminated? So I don't know if you or Carey wants to clarify that or expand on that. I think that would be good to answer just from the group engaging with us right now.
The way that the Green Book laid it out was that the 1031 exchange would need to be completed by 12/31/21. So by completed, just to do a quick refresher on 1031 exchanges, as you sell the property, you have 45 days to identify replacement properties, 180 days to then complete the 1031 exchange transaction. So that puts us at July 1st. If your property isn't sold, I mean, we don't need to throw reverse 1031 exchanges into the fold. But what the Green Book is proposing is that the 1031 exchange needs to be completed by the end of the year. And if it's not, it's possible there could be some retroactive action there.
Really interesting and really good commentary. So thanks so much for the clarification, because I love that the group is engaging with us too and telling us what they're hearing from us in this, because again, with all of this information, one of the things, as someone who assists in all these planning discussions as well, one of the things that I always find interesting is after we share a volume of information, what is actually heard and what people are really catching on to and worrying about, I think is good for us to hear. So thanks to the audience for that great question. Carey, thanks for your response. I think clarifying that and saying, okay, so literally this means we need to have some action in mind at least, and then triggered by July 1st. So Andy, from your perspective, could you talk a little bit kind of about whether it's industry specific from a transportation logistics side, or just even anything that you're seeing that people are either looking forward to or asking about that have been pretty meaningful in your tax planning conversations too?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I think Carey and Susan really summed it up well. Don't panic. We have time. For the most part, I've told my clients, let's extend, let's see what transpires here. And to Susan's point, with an equipment intensive industry like transportation, we have the ability to kind of quote unquote maybe shift our income with our deductions, whether or not we take bonus depreciation or 179 between one year or another. Maybe it's looking at different elections, accrual versus cash. We may have the option up till 9 or 10, 15, or maybe later, to kind of quote unquote shift some of our income. So it's really staying flexible. Let's buy some time and just see what happens. Don't panic. We don't know.
What great words of wisdom and wonderful words of wisdom to close on. I will tell you, and don't, I hopefully Jack Rybicki isn't watching, because I will tell you the three of you have been my absolute favorite live stream to date. This has just been wonderful. Yeah, so you have bragging rights at the next Matrix Leaders meetings when you see Jack, but Jack, you're still one of my best friends. So we'll just keep it with that. But I will tell you, this has just been so wonderful. And I'm sorry that we've run out of time, because I think there's a lot of this that we could continue to share, and that does help ease the panic the more information we have. So thank you, all of you, to our speakers. Thank you to the moderators who have been live with us in the chat, and to you in the audience for your engagement and questions. Please continue to register and engage with us in these sessions that we do have for financial health and wellness. And we will look forward in the summer programming, one, to come to you if we do have effective dates as of the announcement, and there's an announcement soon, we'll be here sooner. But otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing you again on June 24th. So thank you. Until then, please stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to interacting with you.